Hi, my name is Aaron, and I grew up in the Mormon Church, also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like a lot of you probably watching, I went to church every Sunday, I sang the hymns, I read the Book of Mormon, and occasionally on Fast Sunday, I would get up and bear my very scripted and very identical testimony that every other kid gave.
I like to bear my testimony. I know the church is true. I know that Joseph Smith is a true prophet. And what else am I supposed to say?
But most of all, I believed in Joseph Smith and was taught from a young age that he was the true and only prophet of God. And not really ever hearing any of their viewpoints, I just kind of went with it. I left the church in my late teenage years, largely just because I didn't like going. It was way too long for kids to go to. It was loud, all the kids crying. It was hot. I hated wearing the uncomfortable Sunday clothes. It was really boring, and most of all, it just didn't feel right. Although at the time, I didn't really know why. Fast forward a couple of decades, and I started taking an interest in the world around me, largely from a scientific point of view. And I started asking questions. Not rebellious ones, just honest ones, like any sane person should have about a supernatural existence. And the more I learned, the more that I realized how ridiculous religion is, and by extension, Joseph Smith's legacy. It really seemed like there was an extreme effort to hide all the terrible things that he did, both before and after he started the Mormon Church. And as you might expect, the more that I learned about him, the easier it was for me to reconcile my decision to leave not only the Mormon Church, but all religion in general. So today I wanted to share what I found and hope to educate you on some of the awful things that I was never taught as a kid. Before Joseph Smith ever claimed to find golden plates or start a church, he was already in trouble with the law. In 1826, 4 years before the church even began, he was convicted in New York for pretending to find buried treasure using a seer stone in a hat. This sounds very similar to another story that every Mormon kid knows, where he translated the Book of Mormon with another set of seer stones, the Urim and Thummim. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Funny how we were never taught this part of Joseph Smith's history. It almost seems like it's complete poppycock. After the church was established in 1830, he remained a pretty consistent customer with the law. 1837, he was accused for conspiring to murder anti-Mormon Grandison Newell. Although he was acquitted, witnesses including Apostle Orson Hyde testified that Joseph Smith discussed the possibility of killing Newell, saying that it was God's will for him to be put out of the way. Never taught that in Sunday school. Later that same year, Smith founded an illegal and undercapitalized bank known as the Kirtland Safety Society. After it collapsed and everybody lost their money, he was found guilty of illegal banking and fled the state to avoid arrest. Never taught that in Sunday school. 1838. Joseph Smith was arrested for treason in Missouri during the violent conflicts known as the Mormon War between members of the Mormon Church and the Missouri militia. I will give a little bit of leniency on this one because if you read into the events that actually happened, there are some pretty bad things that happened on both sides. While I do remember some of this being taught in Sunday school, the only thing that was ever taught was the bad things that the Missouri militia did. It was never explained to me the bad things that the members of the Mormon Church did as well. Ambushes, looting and burning of settlements, and even a prevention of letting people vote. Was never taught that part in Sunday school. 1842. Joseph Smith was accused of ordering the attempted assassination of Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs. I'll admit that this one was a little bit difficult to prove, but a rational person could easily make the argument that he at least knew about it, if not openly ordering it. Governor Boggs issued the famous extermination order where Mormons were to be treated as enemies. So later retaliation doesn't really seem all that out of the ordinary. Never really taught that in Sunday school. 1844. Joseph Smith was arrested again for treason in Illinois after destroying a printing press that published true but embarrassing information about him. Former church member William Law wrote about accusations of polygamy, abuse of power, and calling himself a king. Joseph Smith was killed a few weeks later while in jail awaiting trial. Never taught that in Sunday school. These are not the kind of acts that I would want from a man of God to build a new and true church. Now, I don't know how a rational person could defend the aforementioned convictions, but even if you wanted to, I really don't think you can defend the most disgusting part about his life: polygamy. I can really hear all the active members watching this thinking, we don't practice polygamy. You're right. As a former member, I can truly attest that we do not condone nor practice polygamy. But even if we don't today, it's pretty well accepted by a lot of historians that he had at least 30 wives. And not just with him, but most of the Mormon leaders were pretty openly practicing it and condoned it. Brigham Young, he had about 55 wives and openly condoned polygamy. Heber C. Kimball, 43 wives, and later let his 14-year-old daughter marry Joseph Smith. John Taylor had at least 12 wives and was a strong defender of polygamy. Wilford Woodruff had at least 9 wives. He did later end polygamy due to legal issues with the government. informant. Lorenzo Snow, at least 9 wives, strong defender of polygamy. Orson Pratt had at least 10 wives and published early defenses of polygamy. Parley P. Pratt, later killed by, I can't get over this, later killed by an estranged husband of one of the plural wives. George Q. Cannon had at least 6 wives and was later arrested for illegal cohabitation. Growing up in Sunday school, at one point or another, I have heard of all of these men. I were taught that they were all very righteous, upstanding men. I was never taught anything about the amount of wives that they had. Learning that now, I have a very different perception of who these people really were, and it's not good. Joseph Smith secretly married over 30 women while publicly denying it. They all weren't consenting adults either. Some of them were already married to other men, and a few of them were mothers and daughters. One of them was just 14 years old. This was not just a product of the time either. The average age of a woman married in the US around 1840 was 22 years old. Some of the rural areas might be as low as 18, but certainly not 14. This is really creepy considering he was 37 years old. He told some of these girls that an angel with a flaming sword would come to kill them if they didn't marry him, while telling others that if they didn't marry him, their families wouldn't reach exaltation. This is pretty well documented, but somehow never taught in Sunday school. This is literally page 1 of How to Create a Cult and How Predatory Men Groom Women. So forgive me for not believing anything this guy says. Another thing that really began to bother me was how often Joseph Smith's revelations seemed to change, usually when it benefited him the most. When people questioned his behavior, suddenly a new commandment would conveniently show up from God, or when he wanted to marry more women, somehow God approved it. When his prophecies didn't come true, the cliche of ridiculous responses that religious people often give would come to save the day. God works in mysterious ways. God doesn't change his mind over time. Either he's all-knowing, all-powerful, and we accept everything he says, or we don't. I don't think that anything he said should be changed over time, especially due to the social pressures of the day. I'm sorry, I just cannot get over that. How on earth was this ever a thing? They do accept that their skin color is a literal curse to be a part of the religion, so I guess it's not that far of a stretch. How could any black person, or any sane person of any race, be okay with blacks not being able to receive the priesthood as late as 1978? I realize that this wasn't Joseph Smith's doing, starting or stopping it, but it is from the teachings of the church that he created, so you're kind of responsible. I know some of this might be hard to hear, but I really feel like we live in an age where it's okay to use our brain, question what doesn't seem right, and be able to call out the BS when it's right in front of you. In the end, I had to follow the evidence, and to be honest, just my basic common sense. I'm not writing this because I'm bitter or angry. Okay, maybe I'm a little bit bitter and angry because I was lied to my whole life. I'm writing this because I believe the truth matters, because people deserve to know who Joseph Smith really was beyond the cherry picking that religious people tend to do. I understand that many people still find meaning in community in the church, and I respect that. But for me, Joseph Smith's actions, his secret marriages, manipulation of young girls, and his ever-changing revelations really just kind of make me want to puke. Thanks for watching. If you learned something or made a sound somewhere in there, hit subscribe. It's the closest thing we get to a prayer.